Well, hi there. Welcome to the Horror Diner, and what was supposed to be my Valentine's Day episode. But as you can see, there's been incidents at the Horror Diner that prevented that from happening. So happy romantic month of April, I guess. I don't know. You do you. Just don't look back there. Everything is fine. Don't worry about it. Anyway, like I said, welcome to the Horror Diner. If you're a returning customer of the diner, it's so good to see you again. It's always great to see a familiar face. But if you're visiting our establishment for the very first time, we're thrilled you decided to stop by. I'm Spooky Pie, your waitress, your chef, and your new friend who's going to sit down and talk about horror with you. Here at the Horror Diner, we talk about any kind of horror media you can think of. Books, movies, podcasts, video games, TV shows, whatever else. But basically, if it's horror, then it's fair game. Everything is on the menu. But that's not all. Every episode, we also cook up a little something that goes with the piece of media we're talking about. Sometimes that's easier than others, and other times a work won't mention food and we'll have to get creative on what our themed eat is, but we're nothing if not adaptable here. So, it's not February anymore. But we're just going to ignore that, because when I was brainstorming what piece of media would be thematically appropriate for the month associated with love and romance, I realized Together was kind of perfect. I've been wanting a reason to talk about Together since it came out last year, because when everyone was talking about the best horror movies of 2025, no one even mentioned it, and to be honest, it was the second best horror movie I saw last year after Sinners. And Sinners is an unreasonably high bar. There's 2 Michael B. Jordans in it. Together does not have 2 Michael B. Jordans in it. Not even close. But what it does have, underneath the frankly staggering amount of body horror, is actually a story about relationships, identity, and ultimately love. But before we get in too deep, let's head to the kitchen and fix you something to eat. Because of the nature of Together, I wanted to make something that was a combination of 2 foods into one new yummy food, which is how I came upon the idea of Banana Bread Brownies, 2 good things that, together, make something new and fun. So let's get started, shall we? Things might look a little different this episode, and you may ask yourself, what is that beautiful house? You may ask yourself, where does that highway go to? And you may ask yourself, am I right? Am I wrong? And you may say to yourself, my God, what have I done? Once you're done contemplating your moral crisis, you're ready to bake. For this recipe, you will need 1/2 cup unsweetened cocoa powder, 1.5 cups granulated sugar, 3/4 cups all-purpose flour, 1/2 teaspoon baking powder, 1/2 teaspoon salt, 2 teaspoons vanilla extract, 3 large eggs at room temperature, 2 large very ripe bananas mashed, 1/2 cup chopped bittersweet chocolate, and 1/2 cup melted butter, which I am not going to show for aesthetic purposes. If you're a weirdo who wants to look at melted butter, go join the melted butter tier of my Patreon. Before you start, be sure to preheat your oven to 350 degrees and butter an 8x8 baking dish for later. Now that we're ready to bake, in a medium bowl, add your flour, baking powder, and salt. Go ahead and combine your dry ingredients. Next, in a separate bowl, combine your sugar, eggs, vanilla extract, and butter. Then whisk those ingredients together. Fold the dry ingredients into the wet until they are combined. Then divide the batter evenly between 2 bowls. In the first bowl, add the cocoa powder and the chopped chocolate. Mix until incorporated. In the other bowl, add your mashed bananas and mix until combined. Add the brownie mixture to your prepared baking dish and spread it out evenly. Then pour the banana mixture on top. Now grab your murder weapon. Stab your baked good and gently swirl around the batter to create a marbled effect. Pop that guy in the oven and let it bake for 40 to 45 minutes. It smells so good. Let's let it cool down a bit before we eat it. In the meantime, head back to my office. Why, hello there, and welcome to the Horror Diner's sister location, which is the place you go when a pipe bursts in your house and you don't get to live in it for a few months. Enjoy your exotic butters. But you aren't here for my plumbing woes, you're here for Together. And you might be squinting at the fact that I referred to Together as romantic. Most reviews I remember seeing of the film, in a very surface-level way, touted it as simply a movie about an unhealthy or codependent relationship. But I think that's a gross oversimplification to the point of being untrue. At the onset, we are presented with a relationship and 2 people, definitely not on the same page, who probably should have had a larger talk about what they want out of this relationship before moving to the middle of nowhere together. But That's just the surface level and ignores the way in which each of the leads grows and evolves as they understand themselves more within the context of their relationship as well as without it. As an outside of it, not as in not having their relationship. You know what I mean. Does it do so with a lot of body horror? Yes. But if you're able to stomach all the weird, goopy Cronenberg-esque grossness, there really is something beautiful there. But I truly cannot overstate how much you need a strong stomach in order to get to that point. Right about now, if you haven't watched the film or looked into it at all, you're probably pretty lost as to what I'm babbling about. And that's fair, so let's talk about it. But to get some housekeeping out of the way, I want to give a major trigger warning for uncomfortable animal stuff, so fast forward through the first 5 minutes or so if you're bothered by that. Also, so much body horror. Like, if you have a problem with body horror, do not watch together. You're gonna have a terrible time. Also, as per usual, I will be spoiling basically the entire film, so if you don't want to be spoiled, skip to the timestamp below to bypass the plot synopsis. But if you've seen it or just aren't overly bothered by the idea of being spoiled, let's get into it. When we first meet our couple, Tim is pawing through a box full of records and photographs, mostly of him and a woman, but he stops on one of presumably him and his parents. The woman from the photograph, Millie, enters the room and tells him to come out and see their friends because they won't be able to see them for a while. There is clearly a party happening in the other room. She remarks on how everyone thinks it's cute that they are dressed alike. At the party, they separate to different friend groups. Millie's friend expresses concern about Tim and their relationship and how them moving to the country might not be great since he has a lot of growing up to do and doesn't match where Millie is in her life, asking if she's sure she wants to go through with it. Meanwhile, Tim is outside with his band buddies who basically rag on him for how Millie has made him lame and how it's, ruining the band. He agrees to tour with them because his fragile masculinity has now been threatened. Millie beckons Tim inside and they stand up in front of their friends, and Tim makes a speech about how change is good and how he's excited about the next step in their lives together. Behind him, Millie gets down on one knee, and when he notices her, she proposes to him, to which he says, "Are you joking?" And then stands in uncomfortable silence. He eventually gives a half-hearted "I do," feeling the pressure of the whole party staring in silence, but it's clear the damage is done. We then see Millie and Tim in bed where he's apologizing. She asks him, "You still want to do this, right?" And he says it's a little late for that, to which she replies, "Yeah, it sure fucking is, but if we don't split now, it'll only be harder later." He apologizes, and after an unsuccessful attempt to initiate sex, they both agree to just go to sleep, facing away from each other. As Tim is starting to settle, he hears Millie mumbling with her back to him about how everyone says he needs her more than she needs him, and how they laugh about it. She says several other uncomfortable things until finally saying, "I can't sleep with them staring at us." And Tim turns to see an older couple with the woman weeping at the foot of the bed, showing this to be a nightmare. We cut to Tim and Millie in their new house in the middle of nowhere while they're doing some unpacking. Tim finds Chekhov's box of power tools left by his father that he clearly cannot operate, before remarking that he can smell something. He follows the smell upstairs to a light fixture on the second-story ceiling. Removing the light and cramming his hand in the hole like an absolute moron, he finds a dead rat king of about 5 rats, so, a great start to their new home. We next see Millie at her new job as a teacher. A fellow teacher named Jamie intervenes when Millie is bullied for taking another teacher's tea bag and invites her to sit with him. He's kind and asks her about Tim and how she's settling in, revealing that they're neighbors. We next see Tim, presumably late at night, playing guitar. He asks her if she can drive him to his gig, since she's the only one who can drive, but since she works, she can only drive him to the train station. Millie asks Tim to come to bed, and he whines about needing to memorize his part, but when she's clearly disappointed, he suggested they go on a hike the next day. We then jump to said hike. Tim decides they should take a different path than they had set out on, following a tunnel through the trees with bells hanging from them. Millie is resistant to taking an unmarked trail because she doesn't want to get lost, but Tim assures her it's fine, they can always turn back. Also, the weather is so nice. So, of course, we cut to it pouring rain, and they are, of course, hopelessly lost. Tim, the genius, falls down a hole, and when Millie tries to save him, he drags her down with him, which is definitely not a metaphor. They land in a cave, and Tim's immediate concern is his cell phone and not whether Millie is okay, which she takes about as well as you could expect. Millie remarks that the cave feels crowded and that they need to leave as soon as possible. Tim ignores this, insisting they wait out the storm in the creepy cave. They realize they're out of water, and Tim has the cool idea that they should drink out of the pool in the cave, which is definitely not a bad idea. The ominous music is surely just set dressing. They sit around the fire that Millie had to make because Tim can't do that either, and they trauma dump on each other. We learn that Tim was the one to discover his parents dead in bed, which also clues us into the nightmare he had earlier of the elderly couple in bed with him and Millie. When they wake up the next morning, their legs seem to be stuck together at the shin. They painfully separate from each other and manage to crawl out of the hole and find their way home. Back at home, Millie heads into town for groceries and Tim gets in the shower. As Millie drives away, Tim feels himself pulled toward the shower wall, and as we cut between Millie driving and Tim in the shower, he's being bodily yanked around the shower in a mirror of the directions Millie is driving the car. At one point, being pulled against the tile with enough force, the tile begins to crack before he snaps out of it. Tim goes to a doctor about this, and the doctor sure is just anxiety and gives him Chekhov's muscle relaxers. The doctor also remarks on how lucky Tim and Millie are, since a couple had gone missing in the exact area they'd been hiking not long ago. Back at home, Tim is hyperfixating on researching the missing couple. Meanwhile, Jamie drops by to welcome Millie and Tim to the neighborhood. Millie invites him in for dinner, and Tim tells him about how they got lost in the woods and had to spend the night in the weird cave that had bells and church pews stuck in the walls. Jamie recounts that there used to be a chapel out in that part of the woods that had collapsed years ago. He says it was a New Age group that dispersed after the destruction of the chapel. We learn that the one thing Tim can do is cook. They get into an uncomfortable argument in front of Jamie about how it's somehow her fault that he can't drive, and how she gets a personal chef while he's trapped at home. It spirals, it's awkward. Jamie tries to defuse the situation. Despite this, after Jamie leaves, Tim decides he's in the mood, but it goes poorly because as we can see, their lips fuse together, and Millie is convinced he's bit her because it hurts when they pull apart. It ends in an argument that alludes to their sex life being virtually non-existent. Later that night, Millie wakes up to what she thinks is Tim pulling her hair, but when she turns the light on, he's actually swallowing it and she has to yank it from his throat. They're both understandably horrified by this. The next morning is when Millie is supposed to drive him to the train station. She doesn't think him leaving is a good idea, convinced he's sick from his behavior, but he insists. As soon as Millie drives away from dropping him off at the train station, he begins to have what he thinks is a panic attack. We cut between Millie in her classroom talking to her friend over Zoom and Tim walking along the side of the road, having abandoned his band equipment at this train station. The Zoom call is with the same friend who was unsure of Tim at the party, and Millie tells a story about how when they first started dating, she told Tim the Spice Girls were her favorite band, so on the next date, he'd brought her their album on vinyl. Her friend admits that this was sweet, but also a decade ago, and what has he really done for her since? Which is when Millie glimpses Tim walking across the playground. She pulls him into a bathroom asking him what he's doing here, and he says he needs to be near her and can't stop thinking about her. And so, appropriately, they get it on in the school bathroom, which, if you've been following along with the peppering of body horror we've gotten so far, is not a great idea because they get, stuck together. They're nearly discovered by a student, which, school bathroom, bad idea, and since Millie doesn't want to get fired, she has to rip them apart to get Tim to leave before they're found, which is great for both of them. Jamie comes in to talk to her because this has all happened in the little boy's room, and he's disapproving, but kind of gentle with her about it. Millie and Tim drive home and have a huge argument, again, about how Tim feels trapped, and Millie decides to go to Jamie's house to do damage control. Jamie invites her in after she starts crying on his porch while apologizing, saying how her and Tim had a huge fight. While Jamie gets her water, Millie discovers a picture of two men fishing. In the living room, Millie talks to Jamie about her relationship troubles, and he asks if they love each other. He tells her that if she's found her other half, not to let it go. She asks him if he lives alone, and Jamie says, "There were two of us when we bought this place." He tells her how they briefly broke up, but he was miserable without this other person. He offers to show her his wedding tape, but she spots Tim lurking creepily outside, so she has to leave. Later that night, Tim is at his computer looking at messages from his bandmates who he left high and dry, but then switches again to his hyperfixation of researching the missing hikers when Millie slams against the glass door to his office. Much like with the shower earlier, Millie seems to be being pulled in whatever direction Tim walks until he eventually pulls her inside. She was asleep through this whole thing and is very frightened when she wakes up. Tim tells her he thinks something's happening to them and that maybe it's the same thing that happened to the missing hikers. He points out all the weird occurrences of them sticking together, which Millie has a million explanations for and is not buying it. Tim thinks they should go back to the cave for answers, and Millie basically tells him to not be here when her parents come to lunch on Sunday, pretty much saying they should break up. They then go to sleep in bedrooms at opposite sides of the house. Sometime later, Tim wakes to his body being pulled across the floor by an unseen force towards the room Millie is in. The door of the room Millie was in opens as she's also pulled towards him, with both of them unable to fight the force that draws them together until their hands touch and they immediately begin to fuse. Tim remembers Chekhov's muscle relaxants, and after having to work together to undo the child lock with each of them only having one usable hand, they proceed to take a lot of them, but it allows them to pull apart at least most of the way before they pass out. When Tim wakes up, he's tied to a kitchen chair with Millie on his lap and a bottle of whiskey and an electric saw laid out on the table. Millie is going to saw them apart, and Tim is firmly against it. She again tells him if they don't split now, it'll be harder later, mirroring their earlier argument, and then saws them apart. Millie insists that they drive to the hospital, while Tim thinks that they should go back to the woods. Millie realizes that she left her keys at Jamie's and heads off, while Tim says he'll wait here. She tells him not to do anything stupid, which of course means he books it for the woods as soon as her back is turned because he listens really well. When Millie reaches Jamie's, he appears to not be home, but we see a bell similar to the one in the cave, which is where we see Tim now. Cutting back to Millie as she searches Jamie's house for her keys, she hears a television in another room. It appears to be a wedding video showing a chapel in the woods with that same bell. Meanwhile, Tim examines the cave walls, finding what looks like human faces embedded in it and old paintings of two people fused together at the back. These same paintings show in the background of the wedding video that Millie is watching. In the video, the two men getting married and everyone in the church descend below the chapel to the cave. They cut their arms while kissing. As the video ends, Jamie emerges from the dark with Millie's keys, saying this was the happiest day of their life. When Millie asks what is happening, he tells her it's the beginning of something wonderful. Meanwhile, a hand comes out of the darkness of the cave, grabbing Tim's ankle, and when he sees what it is, it appears to be two people very badly fused together. Back above ground, Jamie is giving Millie the cult sales pitch, and when she says she doesn't want it, he tells her it's already happening and she wouldn't like the alternative. Back in the cave, Tim recovers his flashlight and shines it on the bad fusion. While not a surprise, this is clearly the two missing hikers. As he does this, Jamie tells Millie it's easiest if she's open and slashes her arm deeply. When she hits him to get away, he briefly starts to unfuse, speaking in two voices before meshing back together. Millie runs towards their house as Tim escapes the cave, and they find themselves in front of the house being pulled towards each other once more. Both of them now realize what is happening. Tim claims he knows how to stop it, saying there's only one way to end this. Tim gets down on one knee and proposes, apologizing for years of being awful and telling her that he loves her. He tells her to close her eyes as he prepares to slit his throat, because it won't end until one of them dies. Millie, realizing she's been fatally injured by Jamie, tells him it's okay, he doesn't need to do that, and to drop the knife, before collapsing in his arms, telling him he'll finally be free. The scene fades with Tim cradling Millie's body and begging her to stay with him. When we come back, Tim is putting Millie on the couch. She wakes up asking what he's done. He tells her it was the only way to stop the bleeding, revealing that he's fused his arm to hers. Tim puts an album on the record player, saying he'd always imagined this song would be their first dance. Two Become One by the Spice Girls play as they slow dance. Millie asks him if he's sure, he says he is. While they take off their clothes, the music swells, and as they're kissing, we see them begin to fully fuse into each other. We then cut to what seems to be the following morning. The table is set with three place settings, while outside an elderly couple, presumably Millie's parents, follow a trail of blood toward the front door and ring the doorbell. An attractive androgynous person with both Millie and Tim's features opens the door, and credits roll. Okay, everyone who left the room, come on back in. The spoilers from here on out are going to be much lighter, and only the ones that are strictly necessary. So, let's unpack what we have here. As I mentioned, we are initially presented with a dysfunctional and somewhat codependent relationship. Millie and Tim are not even remotely on the same page, and don't even seem to want the same things out of life. Millie wants the big quiet house in the country with a stable job. She wants to get married and presumably start a family. And Tim mostly just seems to want to play with his bandmates. He seems resentful of Millie and spends a decent chunk of the film treating her like she trapped him in this life. He treats the fact he never got a driver's license and her wanting to get married as her keeping him like a pet. And while when we meet Tim, his circumstances are sad, having just lost both his parents, instead of trying to process and come to terms with the things in his life that he's not happy with, he seems more willing to use Millie as a straw man for his misfortunes. This is first introduced in the party scene when Millie's brother offhandedly says to Tim that dating his sister has just made him lamer, and Tim seems to agree. But it truly comes to a head in the dinner scene with Jamie. When Millie remarks on never having had to learn to cook because she's had Tim to cook for her, he lashes out, alluding to her trapping him in the house to be her personal chef, even though, as Millie points out, it's not her fault that he didn't get a driver's license. And the irony is, he resents her while relying on her, which makes him resent her more. While we don't get an in-depth look at what Tim's financial situation is, it does seem like he makes money taking the occasional gig and doesn't have steady income, whereas Millie, while not in the best paying job because our society is an absolute farce, has a stable job as a teacher and is heavily implied to be the major breadwinner of the relationship. So there's a contradiction in Tim, where he paints Millie as a villain while relying on her for transportation, housing, money, food, etc., but feels it is villainous of her that he has to rely on her as such. And this, of course, causes friction. Millie doesn't understand how doing these things makes her the bad guy, and is the only one to admit that maybe this isn't working, and that if he's truly this unhappy, they shouldn't stay with each other. She gives him an out before they even move away from civilization, telling him they should just split now if that's how he feels. It'll only be harder later. Tim simultaneously insists he doesn't want this while acting like she's ruining his life. Like I said, it's a contradiction. My harping on Tim is not to say Millie is entirely blameless. Do I, in my opinion, find her to be the more rational and reasonable party here? Sure, but it would be irresponsible of me to lay all their troubles solely at Tim's feet. Millie enables Tim's behavior while saying she wants him to grow up, i.e. have goals more in line with hers, but she facilitates him not doing any of that. At some points it borderlines on almost infantilizing Tim despite them being the same age. At their going away party, one of Millie's friends comments on Tim's immaturity and expresses her concerns at Millie's desire to further entangle her life with Tim's by buying a house and moving to the middle of nowhere with him, as well as her plan to propose. Her friend echoes this concern again later over video call, telling Millie that she does enable Tim's immaturity too much, and as an adult, he does at some point need to take some sort of accountability for his actions. All this to say, we begin with some pretty intense friction, and admittedly, for a largest chunk of the movie, the leads are at odds. But Together isn't a film about two people in a harmonious relationship. It's a film about two people that learn to be in a healthy and harmonious relationship. Joe Botten had the following to say in his review of the film. The film's most impressive achievement lies in its even-handed treatment of both protagonists. Neither Tim nor Millie becomes the villain. The film doesn't point fingers. It sees the couple clearly, flaws and all. Their crisis is mutual, one desperate for connection, the other desperate for autonomy. The result is a metaphor that feels both absurd and real, wrapped in the skin of a genre film. The supernatural element literalizes everyday relationship tensions. Our evidence for the fact that this is not a film about a toxic relationship and nothing else is in the film's ending. When Tim and Millie fuse into a single being at the end of the film, they create a complete and functional human being who would be indistinguishable as anything but their own person if you didn't know where they came from. And the film tells us that only people who are on equal footing and in sync can create this perfect fusion. We see multiple botched fusions throughout the film, people and animals who are not in this state of harmony, and that the result of this is a horrifying amalgamation of two distinct life forms with the corrupted aspects of both. This idea of the fusion itself, then, can be seen as an allegory for a healthy relationship, and that love can create something new and beautiful, as sappy as that might sound. If Millie and Tim had immediately been forced into fusing, it's reasonable to assume that they would have been one of the failed versions. It's only at the end, when they are both on the same page and both willing to commit to each other, that they are able to achieve this perfect fusion. Unless you think this is just me being sappy and trying to turn a body horror movie into a love story, there's evidence for this interpretation directly in the film's inspiration, which is Plato's myth of the androgyne. Also, please keep in mind, this was supposed to be my Valentine's Day video until my house exploded. Anyway, if you're a weirdo alt-theater nerd like I am, you already know this myth because it's the basis of the origin of love from Hedwig and the Angry Inch. If you have somehow never seen Hedwig and the Angry Inch, correct that. But for the non-theater Plato fans in my audience, the myth is basically this. When humans were originally created, it was as beings with 4 arms, 4 legs, and 2 faces looking in opposite directions. There were 3 variations of these creatures. Ones that were a combination of man and a woman, one of 2 men, and one of 2 women. These creatures were complete and happy, but they grew bold and sought to defy the gods. And the Greek gods, being known for their mercy and reasonableness, at first were just going to count the whole thing as a failed experiment and destroy all of them. But Zeus, being the most kind and reasonable of all the gods, as anyone who has studied Greek mythology knows, thought that would be too merciful and that they should be truly punished. Also, if they got rid of all of them, there would be nobody to offer sacrifices to the gods, and that was truly unacceptable. So, in a fit of bastardness, he used his lightning bolts to split the creatures down the middle, separating them into 2 separate entities and dooming them to be miserable for the rest of their lives because they've been separated from their other halves. Anyway, that's the short version. You can also just go listen to The Origin of Love. Jamie briefly mentions this myth when he's consoling Millie, and the cave paintings Tim finds in the sunken temple seem to depict this too. And the idea of being linked to love is furthered by the only successful fusion we see besides Millie and Tim is Jamie, who is the product of a fusion himself. Together is also not the first piece of media to apply a similar concept to convey the idea of harmony, compatibility, and, well, togetherness. In another series near and dear to my heart that truly deserves its own video if I ever get brave enough to make it, the Locked Tomb series by Tamsyn Muir introduces the idea of perfect lictorhood. Without spoiling anything much about the series, because again, if I ever do get the guts, I'll make a video on it, the Locked Tomb takes place in a futuristic society post the death of Earth, and centers around necromancers and their cavaliers, basically their knights who are sworn to protect their designated bone wizards. Within the confines of this universe, there is the concept of lictorhood, which is a powerful state that a necromancer can achieve through the help of their cavalier. This does have some varying results. The concept is introduced essentially as the necromancer devouring the soul of their cavalier and using it as a sort of magical battery to make them extremely powerful. And the series definitely presents us with examples of this type. But in further books, we see examples of lictorhood being achieved where both souls remain intact, sharing a single body. In some cases, this presents basically as a body with two different pilots that take turns running the show, but we also see this as a single entity that becomes something new because they are a combination of both. To get too in-depth into that is to get into spoiler territory, which I don't want to do because A, I really think you should just read the damn books, and B, if I get in too deep here, a subsequent video would be redundant. But again, without spoiling too much, later in the series we do see a version that is a harmonious combination with traits of both, not altogether dissimilar from the person we are introduced to at the very end of Together. In a similar vein, the concept of Together is somewhat analogous to the gem fusions of Steven Universe. Okay, so now you're gonna say, Spooky, are you really gonna talk about Steven Universe on your horror channel? Yes, I really am going to talk about Steven Universe on my horror channel. Sit down, I already told you, hold your questions till the end. Anyway, I can probably assume if you're on the internet at all, you already know about Steven Universe. But you know what they say, assumptions make an ass out of you and umptions, so on the off chance you don't, the very basic oversimplified description of Steven Universe is that it's about a boy raised by a group of aliens that are basically sentient rocks for all intents and purposes. Steven himself is the product of one of those rocks falling in love with a human man, creating him a human boy/alien rock hybrid. That whole thing is a whole other can of worms, and this is not a video essay about Steven Universe. I run a horror channel for God's sake, and despite the occasional Junji Ito and survival horror reference, it's beyond a stretch to call Steven Universe horror. Within the universe of, well, Steven Universe, is the idea of gem fusions. This process is two of these rock people willingly joining together to make a bigger, stronger, different rock person that bears characteristics of the two gems that made them, but is very much their own thing. Much like Together in the Locked Tomb, this process is only truly successful when the two gems agreeing to fuse are in synchronization with each other. This is introduced in the episode Giant Woman, where two of Steven's caregiver gems basically need to become this bigger, stronger gem to accomplish a task, but their inability to get along with each other makes it impossible for them to fuse. Because, again, harmony is required for fusion. Steven becomes obsessed with the idea of seeing them turn into this new form and spends a good chunk of the episode following them around singing about how badly he wants to see a giant woman because Steven is all of us.
All I wanna do is see you turn into a giant woman.
Eventually, the two gems in question, Amethyst and Pearl, are able to reach harmony and fuse when Steven is put in danger because their mutual love for him and concern for his safety puts them on enough of the same wavelength to form Opal, the giant woman. Of course, very shortly after Steven is no longer in danger, the second a conflict is introduced, they abruptly unfuse back into Pearl and Amethyst. Fusion is a core aspect of this show, and it comes up a lot with varying results and impact. But in the show, the example that best makes the case of how it relates to the other works is the character of Garnet. In a spoiler to the Season 1 finale of Steven Universe, it's revealed that the entire time the entity Steven has known as Garnet is a fusion of two gems, Ruby and Sapphire, who are so in love that they stay in a permanent state of fusion to never be separated from each other. This is further exemplified in the big musical number of the finale, where Garnet sings, "I am made of love, and I am stronger than you."
Can't you see that my relationship is stable?
A point that is further exemplified in the episode Love Letters, when Steven tells his friend Connie, Garnet is already in a relationship. She is a relationship. Of course, not all fusions are a good example of this. Since Steven Universe uses these as an allegory for different kinds of relationships, you can get into problematic territory with fusions like sardonyx and malachite. But for the purpose of this video, Garnet herself fits this theme. All three of these examples, while largely fitting into the idea of love, also deal with the idea of how love can change us. Each example of fusion across the three texts involves a level of sacrifice. While very extremely, the sacrifice of autonomy is required for any of these to fully work. In the context of a relationship, it can be analogous to the idea that for a relationship to truly work, you cannot only think of yourself as an individual, but also the wants and needs of your partner and your role in the relationship itself. Even the best relationship requires compromise and cannot succeed if one side is purely selfish. And further, there is the idea that love can make you a different, hopefully better, person for it. At the risk of reiterating a point I made in my Fatal Frame video, Please go watch my Fatal Frame video. Love changes you. If you've ever taken in a stray cat, you've seen this firsthand. Example A right here. This concept is well described by Rhys Hodson in their article, The Nature of Love and Sacrifice in the Locked Tomb. The nature of love and sacrifice in the locked tomb, and in life, and in the world, and everywhere you may look, is change. And what is more horrifying than change? Especially when you've done everything in your power to stop it. And what is love but an unstoppable force of change? The locked tomb shows with fangs and claws bared that change can be terrifying, but it also can be the birth of something beautiful and new. This is not to say that relationships outside of fiction cause you to become an amalgamation, but you do create something. A relationship, a functional healthy one anyway, is almost its own entity, and at the risk of sounding sappy, to love is to create something beautiful. At the end of the day, this is a film about commitment. Do we move forward together as a unit, or as Millie posits, is it better to split now? After all, it'll only be more difficult later. Again, this was supposed to be my Valentine's Day episode. Cut me some slack. Anyway, I'm hungry. Are you hungry? Let's go eat. Dang, that's good. Well, this was a shorter video than our last one, but between the monster that was my Fatal Frame video, please watch my Fatal Frame video, and the ominous happenings that have befallen the Horror Diner, a shorter video was probably in order. What do you guys think? Want to try your hand at making this? And do you have a favorite weird dysfunctional romance movie? Drop your thoughts on the work, the food, and what your favorite piece of body horror themed media is in the comments below. Recipe, recommendations, and sources are all listed in the description below. And hey, if you enjoyed your stay here, maybe you'd think about liking and subscribing to see what we cook up next. And if you want to go even further, we've got a Patreon. A lot goes on in front of and behind the camera to make these videos, and every little bit helps us keep the lights on in the diner and the gas on in the stoves. Patrons get fun perks like getting episodes early, access to the Horror Diner Discord, and possibly even exclusive cat pictures. And patrons of $5 and more get to be part of the Horror Diner Book Club, where every month you vote on a book for me to cover and you can read along with me, and then I make an exclusive video on that just for you on Patreon. We've covered things like Bitterthorn by Kat Dunn, We Used to Live Here by Marcus Klewer, What Hunger by Catherine Dang, and The Sound of the Dark by Daniel Church. It's neat! Patrons of all levels also get to enjoy exclusive content, like me having a mental breakdown after watching Return to Silent Hill. You can find that linked in the description as well as links to where you can find us on Instagram, Bluesky, TikTok, and now on Tumblr. This has been Together. I've been Spooky Pie, and you have been amazing. Y'all come back now, you hear? Just my mic. No, because then it blocks my face. Babe, your mom's here. This is quality YouTube content right here. Me just sitting here smiling awkwardly while my wife and mother-in-law are over there talking about pillows. You wanna go? No. No. Can I just be right here for the whole thing? Just want to be a little snuggle bear for the whole thing? Noah. What are you looking at? Oh no. Hey. Is that where you want to be? I'll commit. You want to be right here? Yeah? Oh. Oh. Yeah? Is that a good place? Oh, those are some distance. Help her, she struggles.